Alex sat in his office, staring out the large glass windows. The view was magnificent, overlooking the city skyline, with its tall buildings and bustling streets. But for all the beauty around him, Alex felt an emptiness inside. He had everything a man could wish for: wealth, power, and success. He was the CEO of one of the most successful companies in the country. But none of it seemed to fill the hole in his heart. He had no family. No close friends. The company was his life, and at the end of each workday, he returned to an empty, silent apartment. The only sound he heard was the hum of his air conditioner. The only company was his thoughts, and those thoughts made him feel even more alone. It wasn't always this way. Alex remembered a time when he had a family, when he was younger and full of hope. He had grown up with a father who worked long hours, but still made time for him. He had a mother who cared for him, loved him, and always knew how to make him smile. But life had changed. His parents had passed away years ago, and since then, Alex's life had become a series of meetings, emails, and phone calls. The joy he once felt seemed so far away. One cold autumn evening, Alex was asked to attend a charity event. He didn't particularly want to go, but his assistant insisted. "It's for the kids," she said. "They need your support." So, he reluctantly agreed. He put on his best suit, the one that made him look even more powerful than he already was, and arrived at the event. It was held at a large ballroom downtown, and the walls were decorated with colorful banners and posters promoting the charity. There were speeches, auctions, and a lot of people who looked as though they had come for the same reason: business networking. Alex didn't enjoy these events. The small talk, the handshakes, the fake smiles, he found it all draining. But tonight, something was different. As he walked around the room, his eyes landed on a small group of people. A woman stood near a table, speaking softly to a little girl who was holding a balloon. The girl was tiny, with big brown eyes that looked a little sad, as though she didn't belong in the lively crowd around her. Alex couldn't help but notice her. The woman, who Alex assumed was the girl's mother, noticed him watching them and smiled politely. "This is Sophie," the woman said, introducing the girl. Sophie looked up at Alex with her large eyes. "Hello," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex smiled back, bending down slightly so he could meet her gaze. "Hi, Sophie. How are you?" "I don't have a papa," Sophie said, her words simple but filled with a kind of sadness that made Alex's heart ache. She didn't seem to be embarrassed about it, just matter of fact. "I only have my mama." Alex wasn't sure how to respond. It wasn't the kind of conversation he was used to having at these events. He could see that the woman, Emma, was trying to hide the discomfort on her face. But Sophie's words hit him hard. He realized that despite all the money, the company, and the fancy lifestyle he had built, he had never truly been needed by anyone. He had never been a father. "You must be very strong, Sophie," Alex said, trying to ease the moment. Sophie nodded but didn't smile. "I wish I had a papa," she said quietly, her voice almost as if she were thinking aloud. Alex was stunned. He didn't know what to say. There was a strange feeling in his chest, a mix of sadness and something else. Maybe it was guilt. Guilt that he had everything he ever wanted but still felt so lonely. Guilt that this little girl, with her innocent face, didn't have the one thing she longed for most: a father. The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Alex. He couldn't stop thinking about Sophie and her simple, heartbreaking statement. "I don't have a papa." By the time the event ended, Alex found himself standing outside the ballroom, looking up at the stars. He wasn't sure why, but something about Sophie's words lingered with him. It was a feeling he couldn't explain. He had never been great with emotions, but tonight, it felt like he was seeing the world through a different lens. The next day, Alex went back to his office, but his mind kept returning to that moment. He asked his assistant to look into the charity that Sophie's family supported. He didn't know why he was doing this, maybe out of curiosity, or maybe because he wanted to find out more about this little girl who had touched him in a way he didn't understand. Days passed, and Alex continued to attend the charity events. He wasn't sure why, but he started looking forward to seeing Sophie again. Each time he saw her, she greeted him with a shy smile, and every time, Alex felt a strange warmth in his heart. Emma, Sophie's mother, began to notice the connection growing between her daughter and the CEO. She was cautious at first, unsure of his intentions. But Alex made an effort to engage in conversation with her as well, and soon they found themselves having long talks about life, dreams, and the future. Emma was kind, but also guarded. She had been through a lot, raising Sophie on her own and dealing with the struggles of life without a partner. But Alex noticed something different in her. She wasn't like the people he usually associated with. She didn't care about his wealth, his status, or his success. She cared about Sophie, and that was something Alex admired. One evening, after another charity event, Alex found himself alone with Sophie and Emma. As he sat across from them, watching Sophie play with her balloon, Sophie turned to him and asked again, in the same innocent voice, "Can you be my papa?" Alex froze. The simple words hit him harder than anything he had ever experienced. The next few days passed in a blur for Alex. He tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept drifting back to Sophie. He couldn't stop thinking about that one question, "Can you be my papa?" It echoed in his mind at the oddest times, while he was in meetings, while he was having lunch, and even while he was alone in his office. It was a question that he wasn't prepared to answer, but it was one that he couldn't ignore. Alex had always been good at handling business matters. He was a man who thrived on logic and strategy, someone who could solve any problem that came his way. But when it came to matters of the heart, he was lost. He had never been married, never had children, and never thought about having a family. His life had always been about achieving goals, climbing the corporate ladder, and building his empire. He didn't have time for emotions, and he certainly didn't have time for a child. But Sophie's words stirred something deep inside him. Every time he saw her, he felt a sense of warmth that he couldn't explain. It was as though her innocence and vulnerability brought out a side of him he never knew existed. And despite his fear of what it meant to become a father, he couldn't help but feel a strange pull towards her. Alex couldn't deny that he cared about Sophie. He cared about her in a way that he hadn't cared for anyone in a long time. But he also knew that becoming a father was a huge responsibility. It was more than just playing with her or buying her gifts. It was about being there for her, supporting her, and making sure she grew up happy and healthy. Alex wasn't sure he was ready for that. He had spent so many years focused on his career that he wasn't sure he could balance both worlds. One evening, as he sat at his desk, staring at the numbers on his computer screen, he couldn't shake the thought of Sophie. He decided to reach out to Emma, Sophie's mother. Maybe she could help him understand what it meant to be a father. Maybe she could give him some insight into what he was feeling. The next day, Alex called Emma. He invited her and Sophie to lunch. She agreed, and they met at a quiet cafe near his office. Alex felt nervous as he waited for them to arrive. He had never been one to share his feelings with anyone, let alone someone he barely knew. But there was something about Emma that made him want to open up. When they arrived, Alex stood up to greet them. Sophie smiled shyly at him, and Alex returned the smile, though his heart was pounding in his chest. Emma looked as graceful as always, her kind eyes meeting his with a hint of curiosity. They sat down at the table, and for a moment, the conversation was awkward. Alex didn't know how to start, and Emma seemed just as unsure. Finally, after a few moments of silence, Alex spoke. "I've been thinking about what Sophie said the other day," he began, his voice unsure. I don't know what to make of it, but I feel like there's something there. Something I can't ignore. Emma raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. What do you mean? Alex paused, trying to find the right words. I don't know how to explain it. I've always been focused on my career, on building my business, but I've never really thought about being a father. And now, with Sophie asking me to be her papa, I don't know what to do. Emma listened carefully, her face softening with understanding. She had always known Alex as a successful businessman, but she had never really seen the side of him, the side that was vulnerable, unsure, and seeking answers. It's a big decision, Emma said gently. Becoming a father isn't something you can just jump into. It's a lifetime commitment. But I think Sophie sees something in you. She's not just asking for a father. She's asking for someone who will love her and take care of her. And I can see that you care about her. But it's not just about Sophie. It's about you, too. You have to decide if this is something you want. Alex nodded, taking in her words. He had always been good at making decisions, but this one felt different. It wasn't about numbers or strategies. It was about a little girl who had touched his heart in a way he hadn't expected. As they continued their conversation, Alex felt the weight of his decision grow heavier. He wasn't sure if he was ready for fatherhood, but he knew he couldn't just walk away from Sophie. She had become a part of his life, and he couldn't ignore her anymore. Over the next few weeks, Alex spent more time with Sophie and Emma. He attended school events, took Sophie to the park, and spent evenings with them at Emma's house. It wasn't always easy, but it felt right. Sophie would look up at him with those big, trusting eyes, and he would feel a sense of responsibility wash over him. But there were moments of doubt. When Alex sat in his office late at night, working through piles of paperwork, he wondered if he was making the right choice. Was he ready to be a father? Did he have the patience and strength to care for Sophie the way she deserved? He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't walk away from Sophie. She had already become a part of him, and he couldn't let her go. One evening, after a particularly long day, Alex sat with Sophie in the living room of Emma's house. They were watching a movie, and Sophie leaned against him, her small head resting on his shoulder. It was a simple moment, but it felt like everything had changed. "I don't have a papa," Sophie whispered again, her voice barely audible. Alex looked down at her, his heart aching. "You have me now," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion. Sophie smiled, a small, genuine smile that made Alex's heart swell with love. In that moment, Alex knew what he had to do. He didn't have all the answers, and he didn't know what the future would hold, but he knew he wanted to be there for Sophie. He wanted to be the father she had asked for. And so, the journey began. Alex took the first step into a new life, one that he had never imagined but one that he knew he couldn't walk away from. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Sophie by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges came their way. The decision to become a father was not one that Alex made lightly. There were nights when he lay awake, his mind racing with questions he couldn't answer. Could he truly be the father Sophie needed? Was he capable of offering her the kind of love and stability she deserved? For years, Alex had focused solely on his career, pouring everything into his company. Now, with Sophie's innocent trust in him, he had to ask himself if he was ready for the responsibility of raising a child. Alex knew it wouldn't be easy. Fatherhood was not something that could be learned in a day, and it certainly wasn't something that could be bought. It required patience, understanding, and, above all, unconditional love. Alex had always been a man who thrived on control, on order. But fatherhood, he realized, was about learning to let go of control and embracing the chaos, the joy, and the challenges that came with it. Despite his doubts, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of peace when he was with Sophie. She had a way of making him forget about his worries. Her laughter, her curiosity, and her unwavering trust in him filled a part of his heart he never knew existed. It was as though Sophie had been sent into his life to teach him something he had missed all these years. She had reminded him of the beauty of simple moments, the moments that he had spent chasing success but never truly enjoying. Emma had noticed the change in Alex. She saw the way he interacted with Sophie, the way he genuinely cared for her. At first, she had been cautious, unsure if Alex's intentions were genuine. But as the days passed, she saw how much he cared. She could see that Alex was trying, and that he was willing to put in the effort to be there for Sophie. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One evening, after a long day of running errands and attending meetings, Alex decided to take Sophie to the park. It was a small gesture, but one that meant a lot. He had grown used to spending his time in boardrooms and offices, but now, with Sophie, he realized that the real moments of life happened outside of the office. At the park, Sophie ran ahead, her laughter echoing through the air. Alex watched her as she ran around, her small legs moving quickly as she played with the other children. He felt a sense of pride in his chest, watching her interact with the other kids, her energy contagious. For a moment, it was as though the world around him had stopped. The noise of the city, the pressure of his job, it all faded away. All that mattered was Sophie, her happiness, her innocence, and the trust she had placed in him. After a while, Sophie came running back to him, her face flushed with excitement. "Papa, look. I made a new friend," she exclaimed, pointing to a boy who was swinging nearby. Alex smiled and waved at the boy, feeling a warmth spread through him. In that moment, he realized that this was what life was about, these simple moments of connection and joy. But as much as Alex wanted to enjoy the day, his mind kept drifting back to the questions that still lingered. Was he truly ready to take on the role of a father? Was he capable of providing Sophie with everything she needed? His doubts crept in again, threatening to cloud his thoughts. The next morning, Alex met with his assistant in his office. They had a meeting scheduled with potential investors, but all Alex could think about was Sophie. As the meeting went on, he found himself distracted, his mind constantly wandering back to the little girl he had promised to care for. He tried to focus, to push his doubts aside, but it was impossible. The truth was, he wasn't sure if he was ready for the responsibility, and the weight of that uncertainty was heavy on his shoulders. Later that evening, after another long day of work, Alex found himself sitting in the quiet of his apartment, staring out the window. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but all he could think about was Sophie's face. He remembered the way she had looked up at him that day in the park, her eyes filled with trust and hope. She had looked at him as if he were her hero. And he couldn't help but wonder if he could live up to that expectation. It was then that Alex realized something. He had been afraid of fatherhood because he didn't know if he could be perfect. He didn't know if he could be the father that Sophie needed. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps it wasn't about being perfect. It was about being there, about showing up every day and doing his best. It was about loving Sophie, even when things were tough, and being the kind of father who was there to listen, to comfort, and to support. With this new realization, Alex felt a shift inside himself. The fear that had been holding him back slowly started to fade. He realized that he didn't need to have all the answers, and he didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to show up for Sophie, to be there for her in every way he could. The next day, Alex called Emma. He wanted to talk to her, to share his thoughts and feelings about the journey ahead. They met at a cafe, and as they sat down to talk, Alex felt a sense of calm wash over him. He was no longer filled with doubts. Instead, he felt a sense of clarity. "I've been thinking a lot about this," Alex said, looking Emma in the eye. "I know I'm not perfect. I know I won't always get it right. But I want to be here for Sophie. I want to be her father, in every way that matters. Emma smiled, her eyes softening with warmth. I know you do, Alex. And I can see it. You're already making a difference in her life. She looks up to you. She trusts you. And that's more than half the battle. Alex nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He didn't have to be perfect. He just had to be there for Sophie, to love her and support her the best he could. As they continued to talk, Alex realized that he had already taken the first step toward becoming the father Sophie needed. It wasn't about grand gestures or big promises. It was about showing up, being present, and loving Sophie with all his heart. That night, as he lay in bed, Alex thought about his journey ahead. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that he was ready. Ready to be the father Sophie needed. Ready to face the challenges that fatherhood would bring. And most of all, ready to give Sophie the love and care that she had always deserved. The days that followed Alex's decision to embrace fatherhood were a mix of excitement and uncertainty. He was determined to be there for Sophie, to be the father she needed, but he quickly realized that being a parent wasn't as simple as he had imagined. It wasn't about just spending time with her, it was about being present in every moment, about learning the little things that make up the foundation of a child's life. It started with the small, everyday things. One morning, as Alex was sitting at his kitchen table, drinking his coffee and looking over the day's schedule, Sophie came into the room. She had a worried look on her face, and Alex immediately knew something was bothering her. "Good morning, Sophie," Alex said, smiling warmly at her. Sophie smiled back, but her eyes still held a trace of concern. "Papa, I can't find my favorite doll," she said, her voice filled with worry. Alex paused for a moment, unsure of what to do. He wasn't used to this kind of situation. He didn't know the first thing about finding lost toys. But he couldn't let Sophie down. He stood up, putting his coffee down, and knelt to her level. "I'll help you find it," Alex said, trying to sound confident. He had no idea where the doll might be, but he knew that Sophie needed him to be there for her in that moment. They searched the house together, looking under the couch, behind the bookshelves, and in every corner of the room. Sophie's small hands searched as quickly as her mind was racing. After what seemed like forever, they found the doll hidden beneath the couch cushions. Sophie's face lit up with joy, and she hugged the doll tightly to her chest. "Thank you, Papa," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with happiness. Alex felt a sense of accomplishment, even though it was a simple thing. He had been there for Sophie when she needed him, and that was what mattered. It wasn't about the big moments, it was about being there for the little ones, the ones that made all the difference. As the days passed, Alex found himself falling more and more into the rhythm of family life. He took Sophie to school every morning, making sure she had everything she needed for the day. He helped with her homework, even when he wasn't sure how to explain certain subjects. He attended parent-teacher conferences, not as the CEO of a company, but as Sophie's father. He learned to make her favorite snacks and to sit with her during her favorite shows, listening to her talk about the little things that made her happy. But it wasn't always easy. There were moments when Alex felt overwhelmed. Balancing his demanding job with his responsibilities as a father was difficult. He had meetings to attend, deals to close, and projects to manage. But now, he had to make sure he was there for Sophie as well. It wasn't easy to juggle it all, but he was determined to try. One evening, after a long day at the office, Alex came home to find Sophie sitting on the couch, holding a piece of paper in her hands. Her face was scrunched up in concentration, but when she saw him, she smiled. "Papa! Look," she said excitedly, holding up the paper. "I made this for you." It was a drawing, a picture of a house with a big sun shining above it. There were trees, flowers, and a little figure in the middle. Sophie had drawn herself, and next to her, she had drawn Alex, with a big smile on his face. "I drew us together," Sophie said, beaming with pride. Alex's heart swelled with emotion. It was a simple drawing, but it meant the world to him. Sophie had drawn him as part of her world, and in that moment, Alex realized that he had become part of hers. It wasn't about the things he had done, or the gifts he had bought. It was about being there for her, being her constant in a world that was often uncertain. "Thank you, Sophie," Alex said softly, his voice filled with gratitude. "This is the best gift I've ever received." Sophie hugged him tightly, and Alex held her close, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. He knew that he wasn't perfect, that he still had a lot to learn, but in that moment, he felt that he was exactly where he needed to be. Sophie trusted him, loved him, and saw him as her father. And that was all that mattered. As the weeks turned into months, Alex continued to grow into his role as Sophie's father. He attended her school events, cheered her on at her soccer games, and comforted her when she was upset. He learned to listen to her when she needed to talk, and to give her space when she needed it. He began to realize that being a father wasn't about being perfect, it was about being there for her, no matter what. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Sophie looked up at him with a thoughtful expression. "Papa," she said, her voice quiet, "do you think I'll ever see my real papa again?" Alex felt a pang in his heart. He had never been Sophie's biological father, and he knew that she would always wonder about her real father. But he also knew that he had become her father in every way that mattered. "I'm not your real papa," Alex said gently, "but I'm here for you, Sophie. I will always be here for you, no matter what." Sophie looked up at him, her eyes full of trust. "You are my papa," she said simply, her voice filled with certainty. In that moment, Alex realized that being a father wasn't about biology. It wasn't about what blood ran through his veins. It was about the love he shared with Sophie, the bond they had created together. He didn't need to be her real father. He just needed to be her father, the one who would always be there for her, no matter what. And so, Alex's journey continued. He wasn't the perfect father, but he was the best father he could be. He was learning, growing, and most of all, loving Sophie with all his heart. As the days turned into months, Alex's life began to change in ways he never could have imagined. His relationship with Sophie had grown into something stronger than he had ever anticipated. He had come into her life as a stranger, uncertain about what it meant to be a father, but now, he couldn't imagine his life without her. Sophie had become a bright light in his world. The moments they shared, whether it was laughing together over a silly joke or sitting in quiet comfort, were the moments that made Alex realize how much he had missed out on. He had always focused on success and achievement, but now, he understood that the true joys of life were found in the simple things. There were still challenges. Balancing his work with his responsibilities at home was never easy. Some days, he felt like he was running on empty, juggling meetings and phone calls while making sure he was present for Sophie. But he had learned to manage his time better, to carve out moments for her, even when the world around him was busy. He realized that his success as a father wasn't about how much he could give, but about how much he was there when Sophie needed him. One afternoon, as Alex was wrapping up a long meeting, he received a phone call from Emma. Her voice sounded a little strained, and Alex immediately knew something was wrong. "Alex, I need you to come home." "It's Sophie," Emma said, her voice filled with concern. Alex's heart skipped a beat. "What happened? Is she okay?" he asked, panic rising in his chest. "She's fine, but she's been asking about her real father again," Emma explained. "She's been a little upset, and I think she needs to talk to you." Alex knew that this day would come. He had always known that Sophie would eventually ask about her biological father, the man she had never known. It was a difficult topic, and Alex had always wondered how he would handle it when the time came. But now, as he rushed home to Sophie, he knew he couldn't shy away from the conversation. When he arrived at Emma's house, he found Sophie sitting on the couch, her small hands clenched together in her lap. She looked up at him, her face filled with uncertainty. "Papa," she said softly, "do you think I'll ever see my real papa again?" Alex sat down beside her, his heart aching for her. He could see the confusion and sadness in her eyes, and he knew that this wasn't something he could ignore. "Sophie," he said gently, "I know you've been wondering about your real papa. And I want you to know that it's okay to ask questions and to feel confused. I'm not your biological father, but I love you just as much as any father could." Sophie looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. "But you're not my real papa. You didn't give birth to me." Alex nodded, understanding her feelings. "I didn't give birth to you, but I chose you. I chose to be your papa. And I will always be here for you, Sophie, no matter what. You are my daughter, and that will never change." Sophie's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, Alex wasn't sure what to say. He had never been good at comforting people, especially when it came to something as delicate as this. But then Sophie reached out and took his hand, her grip firm and trusting. "I don't need a real papa," she said softly. "I have you." Alex's heart swelled with emotion. In that moment, he realized that it wasn't about blood or biology. It was about love, commitment, and the bond they had formed over time. Sophie didn't need a real papa. She had a papa who loved her, who was there for her, and who would always be by her side. He smiled, his voice thick with emotion. "You have me, Sophie. And I'll always be here for you. I'm your papa, and nothing will ever change that." Sophie smiled back, her face lighting up with relief. For the first time in days, she seemed at peace. And in that moment, Alex knew that he had made the right decision in choosing to be a father. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. As the weeks went by, Sophie continued to grow, and Alex continued to learn what it meant to be a father. He wasn't perfect, but he was present. He wasn't always sure of himself, but he was always there for Sophie. And that was enough. One day, as they sat together in the living room, Sophie looked up at him with a thoughtful expression. "Papa," she said, her voice filled with curiosity, "do you think I'll ever meet my real papa?" Alex paused for a moment, looking at Sophie's hopeful face. He knew that this question would come again, and he didn't have all the answers. But he did know one thing: he loved Sophie with all his heart, and he would always be there for her, no matter what. "I don't know what the future holds, Sophie," Alex said gently. "But what I do know is that you have me. I'm your papa, and I always will be. You don't have to worry about anything. We're a family." Sophie smiled, her eyes sparkling with the trust and love she had always shown him. She had accepted him as her father, not because of blood, but because of the love they shared. And in that moment, Alex realized that he had found something more precious than any business deal or success he could have ever achieved. He had found a family, and that was the greatest gift of all. As the years passed, Alex and Sophie's bond grew stronger. He continued to be the father she needed, and she continued to bring joy and light into his life. They laughed together, cried together, and supported each other through life's challenges. And through it all, Alex knew that he had made the right decision. Sophie was his daughter, and nothing could ever change that. He had found his purpose in life not in the boardrooms, not in the deals, but in the love and trust of the little girl who had once asked, "Can you be my daddy forever?" And the answer was simple: yes. Always.